The following is a college course based on the textbooks Marketing and Marketing the Core, written by Karen Berkowitz Hartley and Rodelius, and published by McGraw-Hill Irwin Publishers.
Okay, so we now are going to work on the objective we'll have for whoever's going to approach Doug Smith, and I realize we haven't determined which one of us will make the approach this time to determine with him when would be a good time for us to get together with him in Dallas.
And I think we should.
This is a sales meeting of the Tellen Group. Tellen is a consulting firm that helps other businesses to be more effective in reaching their organizational goals. Today, the team is discussing the best way to approach a potential client, Best Brands.
I propose, Joe, you make the call to Doug primarily because you've had the last contact with him.
The Tellen team needs to convince Best Brands that it will benefit from Tellen's services. To close the deal, the sales team will use all it knows about personal selling and sales management.
One of the things that's on my mind is that
I realized that the conversation you all had was about Best Brands and Doug Smith and how we're going to make sure this week that we are able to add the value that we want. About
Millions of people throughout the world are employed in a position that involves some kind of sales activity. And in nearly every occupation where there is customer contact, there is an element of personal selling. Personal selling involves two-way communication between a seller and a buyer, in which the seller's objective is to influence the buyer's purchase decision.
personal selling is the direct interaction, one-to-one, between a salesperson and a buyer. And it's often face-to-face, sometimes complemented by written communication or email or video conferencing, telephone, faxing.
Personal selling can be an important part of a company's promotional mix. Salespeople are often the main connection between the firm and its customers. In the customer's eyes, the salesperson is the company.
Personal selling is our primary way of marketing at Tellen. And it's because we have a professional personal service that we're offering. And so it's really important that we connect with our buyers on a one-to-one interaction basis. And we, through all steps of the personal selling process, get to know each other. And they get to know our service, we get to know what they need. And as a result of that, we develop a human bond.
moving forward, as we think about what we need to do to get ready for Best Brands this week.
In its efforts to sell its services to Best Brands, the Tellen Group is employing personal selling techniques. By developing a personal relationship with Best Brands, the company is creating customer value.
Personal selling can create value for customers by, number one, as you get to know the customer more, you can then offer unique and creative solutions to their problems, is one way. Sometimes you can learn more about what would be a way to help them buy, so you can ease the complexity of the buying process. And more often than not, customers appreciate when the salesperson comes back and follows up and makes sure what they sold is actually delivered and that they are satisfied.
Paying attention to the customer is the key to relationship selling, which is the practice of nurturing a connection with customers through a salesperson's focus on meeting their needs over time.
Relationship selling is a deeper form of one-on-one personal selling. It really is developed longer term with prospective buyers by just getting to know each other, staying in touch with each other, and really developing a trust and a confidence in the client as well as the client in us and our services.
In this case, the client for the Tellen Group is Best Brands. Best Brands is a leading manufacturer and distributor of high-quality baked goods and bakery ingredients.
The key person that we focused on was Doug Smith. Doug Smith, a former CEO of Kraft Canada, former CEO of Borden Foods Corporation. We've had two successful engagements with Doug Smith. Lois and I believe that...
I think in the consulting business as well as in our business, relationships count for a lot. The bakery business is probably, historically, they talk about how relationships really count when you're calling the baker. Oftentimes they need products at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. They're looking for somebody that understands that. I don't think it's too different when you look at a consultant that's really helping you figure out how to make your organization more effective. We work a lot side by side, and we spend a lot of time together because we really are trying to build a dramatically different organization. And therefore, we need to have an ability to communicate effectively, to understand one another, to have very similar principles and values upon which that we share about how work gets done.
While there are ways to automate a company's sales efforts through technology, such as the internet, it is still mostly a person-to-person activity, and these sales activities must be managed. Sales management involves how a firm constructs a selling program or a sales plan, and how it implements that plan and guides the personal selling effort.
Companies benefit from having a sales management process because it enables them to plan how they're going to sell. They can identify what their objectives are, determine how they'll organize their sales force, at the same time set policies, determine how they'll recruit their people, how they'll train them, how they'll pay them. So it's very important to have a plan before you just go out and start selling.
An effective sales plan clearly communicates department sales objectives and how they'll be achieved.
Primary benefit of developing a sales plan is that, number one, you have objectives that your sales team is aware of. You have account practices that everyone can follow so that you don't have people going out doing sales in different ways. And also you can determine what's the best way to organize, whether you want to organize by product type or you want to organize by customer or geography. So you establish that, and then you set your sales force in the proper direction.
We look at sales planning and sales management as simply a subset of business management. And so we start off with what are the goals of our enterprise? And then thus, what then must we do in sales to enhance the goals of the enterprise? The importance of personal selling and sales management to Tellen is that it is important in a professional service firm that we see ourselves as perpetual marketeers. And so we see it is very important that we see ourselves as marketeers in every interaction that we may have and every image that we project. And we see that as our framework for personal selling.
There are several stages in the personal selling process. This process begins with a salesperson prospecting for leads or identifying and qualifying potential customers. Leads can be produced in many ways, through advertising, referrals, or cold canvassing. This requires a thorough understanding of the company's target market.
Who represents your market? Once you know that, then everything should come from that. And so once you understand your own end in mind, then what you want to do now is find those in the marketplace who have similar values, who have a similar end in mind, and then work to find the win-win solution for them.
After a potential customer has been identified, the sales team gathers information on the prospect and determines the best way to approach that customer. This pre-approach takes place before there is any real contact with the prospect.
The pre-approach stage of personal selling, I think, for us, is represented by us knowing the client, sitting down as a team and talking about things that may be important to the client, things that are going on in that particular industry. So as we go in, we think that we're better able to handle any question or be able to respond with an appropriate context to make them understand that we're most likely the one that can add the greatest value.
In the pre-approach for best brands, Tellen managers stress their professional qualifications, record of success, and ongoing relationship with key company personnel.
The first contact I really had was with Don Hall, probably about a year ago. I was up in Winnipeg looking at another business, and Don Hall had dinner with us, and we talked a little bit about the challenges we faced. The fellow who was then president of the company was with me at that time.
We believe that the key to success of any organization is unleashing the power of the people in the organization. And that, I believe, is a shared belief with Best Brands. They were having difficulty in doing it.
After setting up a game plan or sales strategy, members of the sales team approach the prospect. This includes the first meeting to assess and confirm the customer's needs, which lays the foundation for a good relationship.
In our approach stage, we try to take into account all the things we thought about in our pre-approach stage. What's important to the person, what's going on with them today, what's going on in the industry, what are they trying to achieve over the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. So we take all of that into account.
I bought the business with two other fellows and an equity partner and, of course, a bank who really owns most of the business, but we bought it 3 years ago. And as we got closer and closer to the business, we really recognized that the business was really fragmented. Fragmented from the standpoint of employees were not clear about what their goals were, what their roles were within the organization, or what the processes that were being used to meet those goals.
With Best Brands Corporation, again, we built on our previous relationships and their current situation. And it's with that in mind, staying in touch with the previous relationship, understanding better what was going on, and also staying in touch in a variety of ways. Staying in touch by phone call, by responding to questions that they may have had from us, by sending articles, by sending emails.
I'll start, and I would like us to have as the next step the development of a proposal agreement for Doug. I think based on Joe and Don's feel that he was ready and ripe now, and so I think getting that agreement in his hand would be a next step for follow-up.
For any business, the key to implementing a sales plan is to start with a good sales team.
Sales plans are put into practice through the implementation stage, which starts with the selection and recruitment of a sales team. And the first step of that is really the job description, identifying what kinds of skills you need, what kind of experience and background that you need for your sales team. And then based on that, you can decide how you're going to recruit. And then based on having a candidate pool, you then can set up interviews, make an assessment as to the people who fit most effectively with your requirements.
The people at Tellon work together as a team to obtain and manage new clients. Even though they sell their services as a group instead of one-on-one, it still is a form of personal selling.
The team that brought in the Best Brand account was an existing team that we had. And really, it was just a decision of who was available to work on that account. One of the persons on the team had previously worked with the client, and so they had a relationship. And then based on that, that's how the team ended up being selected to work on that account.
The way we're organized, I think, works extremely well with our client population. And that is the person who is making the sale is also the person who will be the educator, who will also be the advisor, and will also be the facilitator. And we think that makes us very unique. And so we organize ourselves to accomplish that.
A sales plan also includes training and motivating the sales force to make sure they can achieve the firm's objectives.
Training of a sales team can take various forms. It can take just classroom training. It can be on-the-job training. It could be the combinations of those things. It could be seminars, computer learning. For us, we train and educate our teams by primarily on the job, whether they're shadowing a salesperson in another client situation or observing what we do in the office, different stages of who's involved in what. So it's primarily on the job for us.
In addition to training, the firm's sales plan details account management policies. These policies identify the person salespeople should contact, appropriate levels of customer service, and how these activities should be conducted.
When leaders refer to account management, it often means that particularly what are our goals for this account, how are we going to behave with this account, what is going to be our service with the account, what is going to be our follow-up with the account, how are we going to charge that particular account. All of those things are part of the account management plan. And at Tellon, we take that into account in our identifying potential leads, in our pre-approach process, in our approach process, and also in our service process.
Once a company has approached a prospective customer, it needs to make a presentation. This is a key stage in the personal selling process. The presentation is designed to generate interest in the product being sold by demonstrating exactly how it will benefit the customer. To accomplish this, salespeople generally use one of three different formats.
The three types of presentations that are often given are the stimulus response, which is really a salesperson probing the potential buyer and continuing to offer them different suggestions, hoping one of them will be what the buyer wants. The second one is the formula selling, which is more like a canned presentation. It's already structured exactly, here's what I'm selling, 3 reasons to buy, here's how much it costs, kind of situation. And the need satisfaction is more an interaction between the buyer and the seller, really trying to probe and listen to what the seller needs and then offer them a solution that meets their needs.
The way we make presentations to the client is that we come, usually there are 2 of us, and the client usually has a group of people. Sometimes it's a senior team, sometimes it's just a couple of people. And what we do is describe to them how we could add value to them. With Best Brands, we had a relationship with them before, so they knew pretty much that our beliefs and value systems meshed. It was a question of how could we solve the problem that they haven't been able to solve. That is, their tactics and strategies and approach to solving their problem, in other words, getting increased business results, wasn't really working.
Our objectives relative to Best Brands is to really enhance their market value. That's their number one thing. And what we want to do is ensure that we are viewed as adding value to their market value. And also, we want to ensure that the fee for our services is based on that market value. So we really want them to believe that we're not going to get paid well unless they get paid well.
When Joe came, we first spent probably 2 or 3 hours in the afternoon together and talked about, I talked about what I was trying to achieve in the organization. He talked about some of the unique skills and beliefs that he had. And we found that we had a lot in common in terms of how we looked at effective organizations. And I had the organization and he had some of the tools and processes, but we shared the same beliefs and the same values.
Don and Joe used a need satisfaction presentation format in delivering their message to Best Brands. Need satisfaction emphasizes the concerns and interests of the prospective client and involves 2 types of selling styles. Adaptive selling recognizes that buyers have different needs, so the seller must adjust the presentation for the customer's specific situation. Consultative selling focuses on pinpointing specific problems and developing unique solutions for them.
Consultative selling is when the seller really interacts with the potential buyer and offers them advice through the process of, well, here's an idea on how you might do that, or we could do it this way, or what about this idea? Really getting the buyer involved in the selling process.
I think the thing that I admire the most about the Tellen organization is that they have a set of principles that they follow. And what they're looking for is they're looking for other clients that share those principles. In other words, do you really believe that involvement leads to commitment? That leadership is enabling people as opposed to directing people? That information should be broadly shared throughout the organization. Gateway to power, and it ought to be open to everybody in the organization. Roles and processes that make a difference in an organization more so than relationships. How do you figure out how to make those goals, roles, and processes clear?
Every potential client, even one as enthusiastic as Best Brands, often has a series of objections or reasons for not making a purchase that the seller must hurdle before they can complete the sale.
Objections usually are when buyers say things such as, well, I'm interested in what you're selling, but not right now. Why don't you come back next week? Or they may say, well, I can't really afford that. So there are things that really prevent you from moving to the next step, which is closing the deal. And how effective salespeople handle that is really try to probe more or work with what the objections are. For instance, if it's price, you may decide to offer a special price initially that ultimately gets you to the price you want. At the same time, eliminates them being able to say that price is a reason that we can't make a deal.
We knew that there'd be some objections. The objections were in time or in costs or those kind of, the energy, the disruption.
We're a small business, and the previous assignments that I'd had and where I'd worked with Joe previously, we were a much larger organization, several $billion in sales. In this case, we're talking about a business which is, about $150 million in sales. So we really could not afford to do the kind of contracts we'd previously done.
Addressing the prospect's objections requires good communication, which includes evaluating what the obstacles might be and presenting valid solutions to their concerns. Tellon also used its personal relationship with Doug Smith to sell the value of its services.
Because of previous engagement with and success with Doug Smith, the CEO of Value Creation Partners, and our previous success at Kraft Canada as well as at Borden's, he saw the service that we provide in increasing the market value of a private enterprise. He saw that as valuable for him and for the enterprise. And it's because of our continuing to stay in touch with Doug Smith and him continuing to stay in touch with us and him understanding the situation that he was in and understanding that our education advice and processes would be successful that he chose us. Well, I'm glad we got back together to really follow up on the actions that are necessary, given that we've now had what I think is a successful meeting with Doug. And I think that it is important now that we immediately think about the steps we're going to take to ensure that we're able to close this business, I think, in a relatively short term.
After the presentation, and once the objections have been addressed, the seller moves to close the deal or finalize the sale by obtaining commitment.
In the closed stage of personal selling, the seller presents usually to the buyer the opportunity to say, yes, I want to buy. You could do it in the form of a proposal. You could do it in the form of a handshake. So it's really just the movement from the idea that I'd like to work with you, from the decision that I will be working with you.
The closure with Best Brands came as they saw that we were the solution to their problems, that we could add value to them. And it was an evolution from the presentation phase. It was just moving towards, okay, because we had addressed their objections, okay, now where do we go from here? Could you meet with the senior team at such and such a time? And that was an indication that we were moving forward, and we moved out of presentation into the close.
Salespeople use a variety of techniques to close the deal. They may say, I'll send you a follow-up letter that outlines what we've agreed to do. Or they may tell the buyer, why don't you send me a letter saying what you agree to do and able to close this deal. Or sending actually an agreement or just a handshake to say the deal is done and have your people work with my people.
Joe's closing technique was pretty simple. He said, tell me what you think you can afford to pay me, and we'll move forward on that. And having worked with Joe enough, I basically knew what we could afford, and I also knew kind of what his service was, the value of his service. So I said, okay, I'll pay you this on a monthly basis. He said, fine. And that's the way we closed the deal.
The success of Tellon's sales team can be attributed to the effectiveness of its sales management process. Along with recruiting and training the sales force, a sales plan also needs to determine how to motivate and compensate employees. Compensation is often directly tied into job performance, and at Tellon, something more.
I think that compensation is important in keeping an environment of success in your sales force, but I don't think it is the most important thing. I believe that leadership is more important than compensation. And I believe the cause or what you're trying to accomplish is more important than the leader. So what I advocate is having adequate compensation, effective leadership with a great cause. And we think it's the integration of those that's the keys to success.
Evaluating the effectiveness of a sales team and making sure it's meeting organizational goals is another part of a sales plan.
At Tellon, our performance is being evaluated all the time. We give each other constant feedback.
In evaluating the Tellon team, we think that behavior consistent with the values and beliefs that we have is the most important measurement criteria. And so that's where we're constantly looking for, is how does their behavior integrate with our beliefs and values. We believe if once they integrate, then success is certain. Doug, I want to follow up with you. I appreciate the time that we've spent together, and wanted to make sure that I share with you some reflections I've had since then.
After the sale is closed, the selling process continues. The seller usually conducts a follow-up to check in on the customer and make sure that all is going well with the merchandise or service.
In the follow-up stage, salespeople and the support team play a role by oftentimes calling the buyers to ensure that they've gotten what they've ordered, following up to ensure that they're satisfied, and also sending the agreement for signature to ensure that the deal is in fact signed and closed, and play a role also in the invoicing process.
When we deliver the service, we are constantly assessing and reassessing with the client. After an engagement, we debrief. And in a debrief, we talk about what went right, what didn't go so well, how can we improve the next time. So we're thinking forward, and it continues on throughout. It's an ongoing process until the engagement is over.
The victory Tellen experienced in selling its services to Best Brands demonstrates how a business becomes and remains successful by understanding the importance of personal selling and maintaining customer relationships. Just as important to business success is a strong sales management process, a solid plan of action, and a clear understanding of a firm's organizational goals.
There are thousands of consultants around the country, and it's such a generic term that we really seek to differentiate ourselves and not see ourselves as the traditional consultant. For example, we are facilitators as opposed to trying to tell people what to do. The main thing that differentiates us is the fact that we don't do the work of the organization. We work to enhance the learning and development of people in the organization so they do their work more effectively. And we think that for that reason, we set ourselves apart. And therefore, those who wanting to grow and learn as a part of succeeding are the ones who are going to look to us, and we see ourselves as unique in that regard.